Shonen Jump has a long history in which they've cancelled countless manga, and sometimes it'll be the case that a manga that is well loved gets the axe. Today's axe file is on one of those, a beloved manga from years ago that was the subject of many people's love from almost 2 decades ago that met a tragic and sudden end. Full name, Double Arts. Start date, March 24th, 2008. End date, September 4th, 2008. Total chapters, 23. Naoshi Komi grew up drawing manga throughout his childhood and would submit manuscripts to Weekly Shonen Jump while still studying, eventually getting his one-shot Island published in Akamaru Jump's winter issue in 2007, which had ended up winning the runner-up for the 12 Best New Manga Award. And I can see why. It's a conceptually tight work revolving around the premise of this small town that resides in a walled-off pocket that sees 2 children want to scale the wall to see the outside world. It's well drawn and very emotional, and this story would help Komi kickstart his manga career. Shortly after, in issue 20 of Shonen Jump in the same year, Ki no Kami-sama, or God of Love, would debut, that sees a high schooler get trapped in a dangerous love triangle with God, who aims to stop him from getting with his crush. Later that year, in issue 49 of Shonen Jump, another one-shot by Komi would be published called Williams. This would be an adventure story following a young boy named William who idolizes a certain hero and wants to follow in his footsteps. Through these one-shots, Komi exhibits a passion for romance and adventure stories, often with very strong concepts that remain the focus of his narratives, and he would combine all of this with the skills he developed over the last year to start his first serialization in Jump, which is the manga we're here to talk about today. Double Arts begins with the introduction of Sister Elrain, who travels the land in search of people infected by the deadly vanishing disease called Troy. There is no known cure, and it's extremely infectious, with a single touch to bare skin transmitting it, resulting in a horrible set of symptoms like fever, seizures, and eventually your entire being gradually turning translucent until you disappear. The sisters which Elrain is a part of are rare individuals with a high Troy threshold who are able to temporarily take away someone's Troy by bringing it into themselves at a great risk, with many sisters passing away at a young age from taking on the Troy of others. Elrain, after helping out in the small village of Term, collapses and seizures begin, but not before a boy runs to her aid, touching her, and yet he doesn't get consumed by the disease. Kiri, the boy, is the first individual who may be fully immune to Troy, and with this info, Elrain realizes this could be the big breakthrough the world needs to cure this epidemic. There is one issue though. To analyze Kiri, the two have to go to the sisters' main base, and should the two be separated and not hold hands for long, then El will die. Simply, the two must hold hands together even while eating, sleeping, bathing, or literally anything else. This is a great setup for a rom-com, but for the most part the story focuses on its fantasy adventure aspects, as the two have a long journey ahead of them and have to get used to each other due to their proximity. There are action elements as well, since the two are hounded by an organization known as Gazelle, and fights are often very interesting as El and Kiri must fight hand in hand, resulting in some unique choreography. To supplement this, we also have Kiri's full ability, which he calls Flare, revealed a little later on to us. Not only does it increase his healing factor and make others immune to Troy, but if he holds hands with someone, both people's power output is doubled. The beginning is filled with a lot of downtime early on, where the pair meets Kiri's parents, and we get a whole chapter of character building, and I admire Double Art's willingness to do this without bombarding us with constant action. It loves to build up its world, characters, introduce us to abilities, organizations, new friends, and foes. But most importantly, it establishes a strong emotional core surrounding Troy and how much it's taken away from the world versus the hope Kiri represents as a potential cure. Eventually, Double Arts' quiet beginning is interrupted as a gazelle assassin named Luchizezu attacks the two as they're about to recruit a new guard. This is a really good showing of just how strong the people who are after the two are, and it gives us a bunch of mysteries surrounding Gazelle as an organization, like why exactly are they after Kiri and why do they want to take out the sisters, which would mean more people would be infected by Troy. El and Kiri manage to muster up enough courage to at least injure Zezu though, and he ends up leaving for now, but vows that many Gazelle assassins will come to hunt them down. As the two journey onward, they don't do so alone, as the battle junkie Sui joins them, who fights with an iron hoop, a pretty interesting and unique weapon, as well as Farron, an aloof but strong martial arts user. It's frequently made a point that Kiri and L aren't strong nor fighters really, so they have to rely on their wit and their companions. Overall, enemies vastly outpower them, which I think puts them in a unique spot in terms of protagonists, and the types of fights the manga throws at them is pretty different too. They're put in a lot of tricky scenarios, and their companions aren't the best at defending them, like Farron, who flat out refuses to protect them at multiple points, but he does end up teaching them how to fight in a way that suits their handholdy predicament. And he does this through teaching them how to dance, them learning to be in sync together. It's really cute to see them do this activity, it's very wholesome, and it reminds me of that one episode of Evangelion. This also leads us to the title drop of the manga that takes us just over 2 volumes to get to. The name of their new handheld martial arts is of course Double Arts, referring to how they have to fight together. We then get to see their fighting style in action as they're attacked by a group of gazelle assassins, giving us the best fight of the series yet. Though this is at the cost of Double Arts suddenly ending, with Kiri and L vowing to eventually rid the world of Troy and hints of their mutual love bubbling up. Before fully delving into why Double Arts might have been axed, I first want to pile on some praise, as I'm firmly in the camp that this shouldn't have been cancelled. Its abrupt ending that sows even more fun seeds of things to come stings because there is so much Double Arts builds up well. Firstly, the characters of Kiri and L. Their relationship grows throughout the series. There's a fun tension between them initially as they've been put in this uncomfortable yet intimate situation, but the way they talk and open up to one another feels natural and well realized to me. It's just nice to see them together, and there's the basis for an amazing romance here. Then you pair this up with the potential for it to become a romantic battle manga, where the two leads have to be conjoined together as one to bring out their full potential, and I think that idea is brilliant. The elements of hand-holding and later dancing really help flesh out this idea too, and there's strong potential for some very fun fight choreography here. I think thematically, the idea of physical contact, its importance in love and our general lives is explored well too. The sisters being shunned or people being shunned due to not being able to touch because of Troy is a great gateway to this. Building on this concept, I think it also touches on the idea that hurt is unavoidable in relationships. This is true of romantic ones, but it's shown in different ways, like how others getting involved with Kiri ends in them getting hurt by Gazelle, or just in how touching a Troy victim spreads the disease. To accompany this, the ideas of duty and dreams are also explored, namely in a small arc involving Sister Hein, who almost gives up her life and dreams in the name of helping others. The Sisters as an organization and Double Arts as a whole attempts to have this discussion on humanity's duty to help others. How much should we help others? Should we do so at the expense of our own lives and well-being? I don't think it flat out has the answers to all of this, and it's not explored in a tremendous amount of depth due to its lack of chapters, but maybe if it was allowed to continue, it would go deeper with this. Now on to why Double Arts might have been cancelled. First off, let's run through a few gripes I could make against the series. The action isn't the best, not to say it's bad, but compared to the other battle manga that were running at the time within Shonen Jump, you could definitely call it lacking. The next thing is a legitimate downside, but doesn't matter in regards to it getting axed, so ignore that in that context. The English fan scans of Double Arts aren't the best. They're pretty rough scans taken directly from the magazine and are of poor quality. The translation is also all over the place, often filling the dialogue with unnecessary swears or changing up the names of the casts or other elements of the world, like Kiri also being called Killy later on. This is just what we have as English readers, and it likely will affect your enjoyment if you do read it, so I thought I'd bring it up. It also had a very slow and meticulous beginning. A lot of series falter because of pacing reasons, I think. But as a counterpoint, Double Arts is one of the only cancelled series at this length to ever get a second cover, getting one by chapter 13, showing it had to have been popular since Jump doesn't just throw out early covers like this willy-nilly. Double Arts cancellation I don't think was indicative of it doing poorly or being a bad manga. I think it's solely on the fact that other manga were just doing better at the time. This period of Jump was one of its most prosperous periods. You had the big three ongoing: Gintama, Hitman Reborn, Naruto, as well as new manga that were doing great like Toriko, Nura Rise of the Yokai Clan, Bakuman, and Siren. There just really wasn't much room, and other series were slightly more promising, I take it. It's also kind of wild to go back and look at the reception Double Arts had. Of course, some people are critical, but the outcry of people saying, "I can't believe this got cancelled," or some variation of that, especially in the West, is immense. This may very well be one of the first big instances of a manga being cancelled by Jump that Western fans vehemently mourn, perhaps starting the tradition of a ton of manga that people now will look back on and be like, wow, I can't believe Jump cancelled that. I'm thinking of Phantom Seer, Red Hood, etc, etc. Though you could potentially put any cancelled Jump manga in that space that you were sad was cancelled. Just know that is a feeling people have been feeling for years, and if you go beyond this back to the 80s and 70s, I'm sure you had a bunch of Japanese people who felt the exact same as you when their favourite Axe manga got cancelled too. So, we have an idea of what the readers from years ago think, but what about the people who might be reading for the first time with a modern Shonen Jump lens? I have some responses from my Discord server, so let's take a look at them, and if you'd like to be involved in future Axe Files, then a link to the Discord server will be in the description. A fair few people actually found it a bit dull. To extrapolate on this, SDU found it average and boring at times with an anticlimactic ending, lamenting that we never learned the series' inner mysteries, showing that potentially there could be more to love if it got more time. Criticisms definitely extended beyond it just being boring though, and I was surprised by a lot of them. Firstly, Zenomat criticizes the lacking approach to the Troy disease, saying it was played too safely and likely a lot of research didn't go into it, as in looking at how diseases spread and reactions to it. Aside from this, they call it inoffensively bland and point to it having interesting ideas with amateurish executions. Koshek points to it having some clunky exposition, rough pacing, and while having interesting ideas like the plight of the sisters or Kiri not wanting to sacrifice others, they felt it never took these things far enough. They do heap some praise on its wider cast though, like Zezu, Fallen, and Sui, who, as you'll see, many people were endeared by. Ma came into Double Arts with prior expectations from Nisokoi, but seemed surprised by some of its restraint. They point towards the series' lack of agency as one of its biggest flaws. There should ideally be a lot of tension when dealing with a deathly disease, evil organization hunting you down, and the death of someone should they let go of your hand, but at points this tension just isn't there. I can see how this could be frustrating, especially when the core cast are bumbling around towns all the time. They also put forward the idea that the Double Arts should have been introduced earlier to capitalize on more action elements instead of it ending suddenly, which ended up being a shame to them as it was just getting good, a sentiment I saw a few others bring up. They also really like Sui. Cerulean enjoyed and understood why it was such a mourned axe, since the main gimmick is a good source of comedy, drama, and relationship building between Kiri and L. Pacing is brought up as a detractor, especially with how the cast are locked to towns, which means we didn't get to see much of the greater world, which could have been a good opportunity to explore Troy and its wider effects, as that's another thing they found lacking. Joni didn't find the character relationships and emotions compelling, citing they don't mesh well. They also point to some potential holes in Troy and it not feeling very threatening to them, which extended to the villains too. The word pizzazz is also brought up here as something it lacked, and Funky Green similarly mentions it not having this level of oomph that makes a series truly special or stand out. I do wonder if people just don't vibe with the style of the time, since this is an older work. A fair few people bring up its 2000s fantasy aesthetic or vibe, which if you like, chances are you might enjoy Double Arts a bit more, like the following people. Melons ended up praising it for its setting and evoking 2000s fantasy, citing it as more unique than a lot of modern manga which are just set in present-day Japan. The map, different races, and towns gradually built up a sense of place that this isn't our world but somewhere a little bit different. Melons also praises the main duo and the overall concept, since it's very charming and a good gateway for natural character growth. On a deeper level, there's also a discussion brought up on how Double Arts touched on death and duty, since the series is so intertwined with things like Troy, the sisters, and Elle potentially dying. The series dips into exploring this idea and how it intertwines with its world at points, which results in some of its best material. The Hein arc and surrounding chapters are pointed out here as examples. A really solid criticism Melons gives, though, is about how the story is framed, as it's more the characters waiting around in towns and less a grand journey like it was probably meant to be. This is another example of someone really lamenting its sudden ending and someone who clearly enjoyed the work. They also really loved Sui. Jinwon enjoyed, especially the dynamic between the two main characters, and felt it didn't deserve its sudden acts. They also bring up Kiri and Elle looking like Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy characters, which I've heard a few people say. They definitely exude 2000s RPG energy, which is something a group of people were clearly into. Building off of this, Valant was drawn in by these designs, also citing Kingdom Hearts, but couldn't connect with the series much, stating they spent too much time in the city and it felt like the manga was stuck in a traffic jam. Something that's weirdly accurate. I definitely understand the traffic jam metaphor there. Kinky mentions that they went in having not read Nisekoi, something a few people brought up as it likely gave them some kind of preconception as to how double arts would play out, even if the two series are very different. Ultimately, they mentioned Troy and the whole goal of finding the cure to be pretty fresh in the grand scheme of shonen manga. It's different enough from the usual want to be the pirate king or fight the usual big bad that it stands out. They also bring up liking Sui. Jesus Flash was sad to see it end. They enjoyed many of its ideas like the Troy disease, the sisters as an organization, the hand-holding gimmick, and double arts as a dance fighting style which they call really wholesome. They found some elements incongruous though, like the whole thing about the different races, which a few people brought up as confusing, which I think is a relic from older fantasy works and how they'd world build, but I can see how it could be too grounded, odd, or dense in comparison to some of the more anime fights and tropes. To conclude, we got a wide array of opinions and feelings. Plenty of people did enjoy and saw why it was something mourned over years ago. It's also an interesting case where older tropes and ideas are very much felt in its designs and world building. It's interesting to see people's reactions to older manga like this. I think some people approach it with modern expectations and lenses, and others come at it with evoked memories and preconceptions of specific media from a specific time period. I don't have anywhere I'm really going with this, but this outside bias we hold when we come to discuss or experience media intrigues me quite a bit. It's often most observable when we do older Axe files, which makes them very fun to tackle. So where are we now? After Double Arts would end, Naoshi Komi would continue to put out one-shots at a fast pace, with Personant coming out in Jump Square's December issue of 2008. This would take place in a world where everyone wears masks, but a sole criminal called Damore doesn't, who aims to spread his ideals of freedom to the rest of the world. Shortly after, another sci-fi one-shot would pop up, this time in Shonen Jump issue 4-5 of 2009 called Apple. This would see the Earth create a new life form to protect itself from an incoming catastrophe, which ends up being named Apple. It can take the form of any being on Earth and use psychic powers, though most often it takes the form of a young human who wants nothing more than to live a peaceful life, but it gets bugged by the military and a young boy who ends up becoming his friend. The one-shot for Nisekoi would be next, debuting in Jump Next winter issue of 2011, with it being so popular that Nisekoi would become a series later on within the year, in Shonen Jump issue 48 of 2011. Nisekoi would be a huge hit within Shonen Jump at the time, a time when they really needed one as well, as the prior year of 2010 had been exceptionally barren in terms of new series. Its approach to the rom-com genre remains popular even to this day, with series like Hime-ten currently running in Shonen Jump, evoking its tone and formula. It would see a bunch of spin-offs and collaborations in the years following its debut, as well as a short series by Taishi Tsutsui, Magical Patissier Kosaki-chan, who would go on to become another successful Shonen Jump rom-com author. Since Nisekoi's conclusion in 2017, Naoshi Komi hasn't done much aside from a few more one-shots, perhaps content with having had a pretty large hit within the magazine. From his new adventures, we have Tokidoki, which would be published in Jump Giga Volume 4 of 2016, and it would be about a girl who suffers from a heart disease who struggles to live their life to the fullest, going for a kind of tragedy angle. Then we have I no Genten, Starting Point, which would show up 2 years later in Weekly Shonen Jump issue 6 of 2018, following a capital G gamer named Takemi Tomouchi who has nothing in his life except video games. But one day, after a string of bad losses, the school's student council president comes into his life and welcomes him into the world of pro gaming. This might also be one of the worst things I've ever read from Jump, and I'm very glad it didn't get picked up for serialization. 3 years later, in Weekly Shonen Jump issue 39 of 2021, we would see Komi return with One Piece. Naoshi Komi covers Vivi's adventure, which, as the title suggests, is a one-shot about Vivi from One Piece. And then most recently, in Jump Giga's summer issue of 2022, we would see Seijo no Chi be published, a vampire story that mixes romance and battle elements. While Komi's output has been sporadic, perhaps we'll see them again in Jump one day with future one-shots or even a series if they feel up to it. And that brings the file on Double Arts to a close. It was fun to go back to an older cancelled manga for this one and investigate Naoshi Komi in a bit more depth, as previously I'd only known them for Nisekoi. If this video was entertaining and you like hearing me talk about old Shonen Jump manga or cancelled manga, then consider sticking around as there's plenty of that on my channel. I have quite a few videos like this one where I run through cancelled manga, as well as a whole other series of videos where I run through Shonen Jump's history year by year. Also, if you really like what I make, consider supporting me on Patreon, which you can do for as little as $1 a month. If you do, along with making me super happy, you'll get access to a bunch of exclusive videos, some of which are of me and my first impressions on the newest Shonen Jump manga. If you'd also like to go the extra mile, at the $3 tier, you'll even get a unique little doodle to represent you in the end credits of my videos, like all of these cool people. Thank you so much, Trinity, Jade, Kaizoku Gairu, Soroquil Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Faco, Yellowtail, Lacelogget, Chris P. Bacon, Joe Henshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Yuzakura Psycho, Wurzel, Violent, Cactus, Joni, City Name E, Vina Burrito, Caffeine Dad, Cryonaut, Crash, 41IZ, Hong, Jamie Reynolds, Manu, Poke Emblem, James Miller, Jopa Monkey, Just a Virus, Star Sphinx, PK Broly, Fenrir Black, Elijah Espinoza, Neo Humanoid, Mark Nielsen, Electropirate, Jay Vasso, Three Frogs in a Trench Coat, and also Hilltop, Vaco Draws, Otaku Gamer X, Deadpan, Shy Monkeys, Jonathan Dragonet, John Sanford, Cutler, Jaime, Strawberry Pressione, Vaz, Palette, Ruiner, Juice, TG Talks Manga, Kuromi Knox, Eric Gorski, Miss the Shira, Gay Shark, Grizz Exploder, Dextora, and Eni Oshowo with the $1 tier. Thank you all so much for being patrons, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.